Mayor, thanks for coming to the Organization of Spanish-Speaking Officers today to talk with us. As you know, we've already introduced ourselves to you, but again, I'll say Domingo Garcia,
Francis Dominguez,
Pedro Gonzalez, Gabriel Garcia.
And we're going to conduct an interview so that we can take it to our board and present who we should support this year in this year's mayor's race. Okay, well, let's get going. Your name?
I'm Annise Parker, Mayor of Houston.
And what party are you associated with?
I'm a Democrat.
Okay. And why are you seeking a third term?
I'm not done. I still have a lot to do. The first term really was about keeping the boat afloat, making sure that we didn't suffer too much damage during the recession. This term has been about, positioning the city and moving it forward. The last term we'll be able to gain from the things we've done to stabilize the city. I actually look forward to a last term where I can actually be proactive instead of as reactive as I've had to be.
Okay. I'm sure I've asked you this question before. Are Spanish speakers a big part of your administration?
They are. I have my agenda director is Latina, my press secretary is Latina, but not just Spanish speakers in terms of, I don't think any mayor in the history of Houston has appointed as many Hispanic leaders to high positions in boards and commissions. Chair of Metro, Gilbert Garcia. Chair of Rebuild Houston, Gilbert Herrera. Port Commission Chair, Janice Longoria. Rick Campo, Chair of the Houston First and the Super Bowl Committee. Ed Gonzalez, I appointed him my mayor pro tem. That's a straight mayoral appointment. So.
He's one of our members. We're interested to know what endeavors that you or your staff completed since our last conversation that improved the opportunities for OSSO members. I know for Hispanic individuals, you named those, and that's a good list. And we're talking about for OSSO. Is there anything since our last conversation that maybe any discussions you had with your staff about how Spanish-speaking officers can take part or take a bigger part in the department?
Well, first of all, I'm very clear that I ought to run the police department. I appointed a good chief. I wanted to appoint from within, and while I meet on a weekly basis with the chief and interact regularly with the command staff, barring unusual circumstances, I expect the department to be run by police officers without political influence and interference from the mayor's office. I think that's been one of the problems with the police department in previous administrations. That said, I have faith that the entire command staff understands that we have to have a department that reflects the diversity of the city, that the major racial and ethnic groups of the city have to be represented on the command staff and throughout the department. I'm particularly interested in making sure that the new cadet classes, and we have maximized cadet classes, have a strong representation of not just Hispanic cadets, but Spanish-speaking cadets, because we have a real need for that in policing. The latest reorganization by the chief, which I signed off on, moves Executive Assistant Chief Martha Montalvo into his Chief of Staff position. The first time we've had an Assistant Chief as his Chief of Staff, which essentially means that she is the number 2 person in the police department. I think that sends a very strong signal to the Chief McClellan's commitment to everyone in the department having representation.
Now, this question I asked you last time, I capitalized on it a little bit. The Mexican cartels are the most significant organized crime threat to Texas, with 6 of the 8 cartels having their organizations operating here in the state and in the city of Houston. Since the last time we talked, how has your office upgraded its plan in confronting the following: the ever-increasing threat of human and narcotic trafficking, the smuggling that passes through the freeways, there are many safe houses throughout the city, the flow of stolen vehicles from Houston into Mexico?
Let me start first with the issue of human trafficking. I have a large and fully engaged task force on human trafficking that I created last year. I believe I had a 30-member task force, and we immediately realized that there were more stakeholders than that, and we had to broaden it and then break it into subject areas, focus on domestic human trafficking and international human trafficking, domestic labor versus the sex trade. And so I have a lot of groups working to link the various nonprofits across the city that are engaged in this, as well as the law enforcement resources. Sheriff participates, the Sheriff's Department participates, the Houston Police Department participate as well. We have increased our engagement with federal agencies that are interested in not just human trafficking or narco trafficking, but the whole understanding that one of the reasons I think that, and what I hear from them, that Houston hasn't had the violence that a lot of cities have experienced, is that this is where they come to do business. We need to, the focus has to be on the leaders of the cartels, the money men who are coming to Houston to make the transactions, not necessarily the street level engagements, but at the highest level, which means that we have to work with ATF, we have to work with the FBI, we have to work at a different level than we really have focused in the past. But we have to keep all of that going.
Yeah, one place I've noticed where that's very visible, where I think it's their business community that's here, is in the Woodlands area.
Well, the Mexican business community, everybody has a second home in the
Right.
Woodlands, it seems. But, are those legitimate businessmen and women, are they laundering money?
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right. Can also count on you to use your influence to bring HPD incentive pay, Spanish pay, or foreign language pay, to the same level as four-year degree incentive pay. Currently, Spanish incentive pay is at approximately $60. We get it every 2 weeks. And four-year degree pay is at $140. One of the things that we've been asking for or wishing for is that the Spanish pay should match the four-year degree pay. And one of the arguments we have for that is, if you ever go to any patrol station and you listen to the radio for a shift, you'll hear at least 3 to 4 times during that shift, "Get me a Spanish-speaking officer to my scene." And we know that, I have a degree also, but I know that when they offered that incentive pay for a four-year degree, it was to bring a more professional officer, an officer who could write better offense reports, and that has improved. But Spanish pay is, the officer who speaks Spanish in his division or detail or investigative division, they've got to do their calls, and they've got to help their fellow officers with the interpretation, which is no big deal. They enjoy doing it. But also in investigations, it's an issue too, because our guys are doing investigations, and then they've got to do the interpretation for the investigator who can't speak Spanish. They have to interrogate the suspect or interpret for a witness, and then they have to go and type out for that investigator. So it's not that they're doing double duty. They are doing a little bit more than their counterparts, but all they're asking for is that the pay match.
That's not a decision I make. That is a decision that is negotiated through the contract. I certainly get the point, and I'm a big believer in incentive pay. I'm assuming that the recognition by the department of the need for more bilingual officers is why we have the incentive pay as it is now. We added incentive pay for training officers. I believe that every police officer ought to be paid, trained, and equipped adequately. But then if you have extra skills that are applicable to the department, you ought to be compensated for that. But that's a subject for meet and confer negotiations.
And I agree with you on that. I think next...
It is different. I don't think it's the same thing. The goal of the degree, pretty accurately reflected why the department wanted officers with higher education. But the incentive pay category, there's a range of incentive pays, all of which are important to the department, and I support them.
Okay, now when I ask you this question, I have to be careful because some of my my fellow members here misunderstood the way I wrote it up. So let me flow through it, and then I'll correct it or make sure there's no misunderstanding on what it is. There is language in the contract between the city and the HBOU that gives a person with a master's degree pay more incentive pay and more opportunity. And what I mean by that is, if you have a master's, well, you get an additional $100 over the $140 that you would get for a bachelor's degree, which is understandable. They deserve it. It's a degree to earn. However, but it also keeps you from becoming an AC, becoming an executive chief, and becoming a chief.
What do you mean it keeps you from?
Well, I think there's language in the contract. I don't have the contract in front of me to refer to, but I think you can't hold those positions unless you either pursue a master's degree or have one.
Yes, higher, that too is a subject of meet and confer negotiations. It did not come from the city side, is my understanding. That is a desire within the department to have a more professional command staff.
All right.
Our goal in the negotiations was to make sure that those degrees were from accredited universities and that they were meaningful to the skill sets that make a better police officer. But
Yeah.
you have finished your question.
No. You've almost answered it halfway. I guess the other part would be, but a lot of our members are veterans, and what we're I don't know how we're going to do this, since it's not all you that needs to do this, but it's an idea that we have to put out there. A lot of our members are veterans, and so they have honorable discharges from the service, and they're not asking that the master's degree be taken away from that professional curriculum or idea.
Mm-hmm.
What they're asking is that if a veteran served in the military with an honorable discharge, he gets a lot of experience from that service because he serves mainly overseas, he serves stateside, he goes through a lot of training.
Which is why we exempt them from the college requirement, the baseline 60-hour requirement.
Exactly, true. So I guess what I'm saying, like in the contract this time around, there's a section in there that says if you have a bachelor's degree, you get 1 point added to your score after you get your written score, correct? If you have a DD Form 214, which means you served in the military, active duty, and got an honorable discharge, you get a point also. However, you don't get 2 points. You only get 1 point for either or. You can be a veteran with a bachelor's degree, but you're only going to get 1 point. You could be. You understand what I'm saying, right? What we were saying was, why was it neutralized? There are veterans that have.
That is a discussion. Respectfully, that's a discussion to be held within the ranks, so that when we go back into the next bargaining session, that's on the table.
Well, and all I'm doing, I understand what you're saying. I'm just introducing the idea. So we'll go on the civilian side, we have a veterans hiring preference as well. I would love to fill up the ranks of city employment at all levels with incoming veterans. I think veterans have they're more disciplined, they have a broader worldview, and often they are very committed to the job. And that's why we have the veterans hiring preference. Well, they appreciate you saying that. Okay. The promotional system, I know this is probably a contract issue also, is from OSSO's perspective, an experience that I don't want to say we're kept from taking those tests, but when we take those tests, I'm talking about for like lieutenant and captains, we don't do, our numbers are not or don't do very well up there. And I'll just give you an example. When they took the 2012 lieutenant's promotional exam on test 8, there were 13 Hispanics in the top 50. 2 of the 13 were in the top 10. Then they appealed the questions, which is a natural process that happens. And then that moved it from 12 Hispanics, only 12 Hispanics are in the top 50 and only 1 in the top 10. When they did assessment centers, when they went and did the interviews or did the assessment exercises that they're required to do, to get the final score, the final list came out that there were 10 Hispanics in the top 50, which means the numbers reduced, and there were 0 in the top 10. So, and as of this date, only 2 Hispanics of almost 20 have been promoted to lieutenant. So it's not the written score that's hurting us. It seems to be whatever the instructions are to the assessors from whoever in the command staff has given it to, telling them what they're looking for. And I don't know what's hurting our guys. I don't know. I don't know, but the numbers are surely showing us being moved down.
We have a critical lack of Hispanic captains. I'll give you 2 answers. One, I believe the chief ought to have the ability to appoint captains. I'm a believer in not just the written test, but the assessment centers. But I think it's that assistant chief is too high up to have to be the first level that's completely appointed. I think the chief ought to be able to appoint all or some of the captains. And there's not any chief of police that the city would ever hire today or in the future that wouldn't be aware of the need to have leadership in the department that reflects the city. But that's, again, a meet and confer process question. The other answer I will give you is that I think there should be a charge to the Hispanics who are on the command staff and within the department at the captain's level to create a mentoring group of a study group for those who want to take the captain's test. Put them in a room together, help talk to them about potential questions, give them. This works in the private sector. It works in other cities where groups that are interested in seeing a certain group advance through the ranks puts together a support network and helps push and or pull them up. I'm not talking about like confidential information. I'm talking about, hey, I'm an assistant chief. I know what it takes to get here. I know what you need to do to get to be captain. I'm going to sit down with you, an hour a week, and I'm going to drill you on things that I think you ought to know. I'm going to walk you through a sample assessment center, a questioning session, so that by the time you get there, you're more comfortable. I think that's the best thing you can do to raise the number of people who move up.
Yeah, I agree with you that.
But that means the people who are already in these positions have to step up.
Yeah, I agree. And I was going to go through the captain's numbers, but they're about the same also. If I don't know if we'll get a Hispanic captain this time around. You have to go down to number 16 to get her. Anyway, well, we next time it comes around, and we're going to have to approach the HPOU too, but we're going to have to maybe do it as a partnership and say, listen, we have some ideas, and we have some good ideas to change that outcome. And it's not bypassing the written exam. And I'll just give you one or two. And then
even for the written exam, putting together study teams where those who want to take that exam support each other, study together, drill each other on questions. I know this whole thing about we're police officers, we do it on our own, but
right.
Everybody
Exactly.
could use some help, and you have to get through the written exam. We're not going to do away with that.
No, I agree.
You can get higher scores on the written exam, and you can be better prepared for the assessment process.
Right. Yeah, and the only point was after the written exam, maybe we could consider the totality of the resume.
If you have appointed captains, that's why I say it's really important to get that.
Yeah.
If that's the goal.
Well, yeah, true. maybe give a point for military service. And this was an idea. I don't know how this will be received by the HBOU. I am going to have to approach it on it. Maybe give a point for every 5 years of service in patrol or in investigations. Maybe a point for foreign language. But anyway, those are just ideas we can talk about later.
I think I don't know, I can't speak for HPOU. I think they would be more interested in something that was really clear and transparent, like, yes, a point for this, a point for that.
Mhm.
I'm on the side of, I'd rather have the flexibility to pick the best person for the job. You have to have minimum qualifications, but the best person based
Mhm.
on the totality of experience and the evaluation of the senior leadership team in the department. But the downside of that is that people say, oh, well, that's favoritism. That person got jumped over
Right.
everybody else. So there's give and take there.
Right. Okay. Because of the recent jury verdict in favor of HPD Officer Christopher Zamora against the City of Houston, have you or your staff suggested any improvements for HPD, or what do you think, or what do you think about the verdict in general?
I'm not into the weeds on the verdict, and the case started long before I became mayor.
Correct.
I know that obviously I and the chief, the legal department, were all very well aware of the issues, which is why when you ask questions about how we can get Hispanics higher into the ranks of the police department, I had a number of answers, because we've been thinking about this and we've been trying to put the mechanism in place to make it happen. It has to happen within the constraints of the legal process, and it has to happen within the constraints of the contract. But the best news is that overall, the makeup of the department, not in the senior ranks, but the racial and demographic makeup of the department, is becoming much more like the City of Houston. And with each new cadet class coming in, that becomes more true. So there's a really targeted effort to have that diversity in the incoming officers.
Okay, who's your opponent?
I have at least 3.
Okay, I know one, and I think I've seen a name for it.
There's a Mr. Cook, a Mr. Hall, and a Mr. Dick.
Okay. Tell us why our membership should support you over all the other candidates or your opponent.
Don't ask, well, because I don't think they have any chance, but you don't have to believe me. Bob Stein of Rice, Dick Murray of U of H, Houston Chronicle, every third-party political analyst has said, why are any of these guys running, and how do they ever hope to win? I have one opponent who has said he's going to self-fund. I have 95% name ID and huge favorable ratings in the city, and with each week, I'm on TV with more good news, and the voters of Houston are feeling much better. The one opponent who says he's going to self-fund, he has 5% name ID. If we spend the same amount of money, he gets creamed. If he spends 2 to 1, 3 to 1, I have to pay attention to him. Less than that, and I'm sitting on nearly $3 million in the bank, means he's got to put $7 to $10 million in the race. He may be the $10 million man. Show me the money. He also, I have yet to see any of my opponents articulate why would you want to replace the leadership in a city that's doing well? I know that Mr. Dick, who is an active Republican, plans to pull from the conservative Republican ranks. Mr. Hall, who is a Democrat but hired all his campaign staff as Republican, hopes to pull African American votes and Republican votes. I think Mr. Dick will cut away at his right-wing support, and I also don't think anybody that calls himself a Republican will vote for someone who doesn't pay his taxes. That was reported, you have to believe me, that was reported on KHOU Channel 11. He is a chronic tax evader. He always pays late and pays thousands of dollars in penalties. If taxes pay your salary. Taxes pay my salary. I always pay my taxes and I pay them on time because I think I'm going to the voters and saying, I want this job. I have a responsibility to make sure that I close that loop. I don't think certainly not the West Side will ever vote for anybody who just says, I don't have to pay taxes on time, doesn't matter. So I don't want to, I never take opponents lightly, and I have a full-scale campaign. I'm aggressively raising money. I have 100 and some odd intern volunteers for this summer. I always run an internship program because I'd like to train the next generation of community organizers. So I'm running a full-scale campaign, and I expect to have an opponent who's well-funded. I just don't see how he has a path to victory, unless I get hit by a bus between now and then. I'll do my best to not have that happen, but it's possible.
All right, 3 more questions. What is the status of the HPD pension system from your perspective?
It is technically considered fully funded. It's at about 80%, and you know, I don't know if you're aware that since you're talking about funding that's 30 years in the future, there are lots of different variables, and so from an objective standard, 80% and above is considered fully funded, and so it's above 80%, it is considered fully funded. I have a good working relationship with the HPD pension board, and in fact, during the depths of the recession, the pension board agreed with the city to allow us to, in order to not lay off actually city jailers, to defer a pension payment. That doesn't mean that you have less money in your pension. What it meant was that instead of a pension payment, we gave them part ownership of the Travis Police Headquarters. We have the hottest real estate market in the country right now. That equity interest is earning a minimum of 8.5%. If we buy them out, we have to pay them the deferred payment plus 8.5% per year. But it also means that if they leave it with in the building in which we're going to sell in order to build a new police complex, that they have a good investment. And so we think that we appreciate that the pension was flexible, and that we think they're in a good place.
It's going to turn out to be profitable for everybody.
We think it's going to turn out to be profitable for them.
Okay.
We are actually beginning, it was 3 years of deferred payments. This budget, you'll see in the budget that we're paying them back the first year plus, the 8%,
Interest.
8.5% interest. But we're in continued negotiations with them as to whether they want to stay as an equity partner or whether they just want their money.
Okay. Healthcare. How was our insurance went up a little bit, not too much, but
City side went up too.
Yeah. How's that looking for us for the next 2 years?
We're in the 3rd year of a 3-year contract. We do have the ability to extend for 2 option years, but the insurance market is very fluid because of the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare, and we're gonna go back out and test the market. The overall part of the insurance premium that our employees pay is 75%, the city paid, or 25%, the city paid 75%. We kept it. Both sides went up the same percent. But we spend $300 million a year on insurance. It's very, very expensive. And we have the richest health insurance benefit of any of the government entities in this region. I'm going to do my best to maintain it and to keep that 75-25 ratio, but healthcare costs, right now we're budgeting that they're going to go up 10% a year every year from here on out. But we are going to go see if there's, we're going to test the market again, which means that Blue Cross will come back in, Cigna will come back in. I think that United Healthcare, there's some other big companies. But we're a 63,000 member covered population, so it has to be one of the really big companies.
Well, any last questions? I got a last one before I'm just letting them know.
Open it up.
Anything you got?
Yes, there are you've made several improvements throughout the city, your campaigns, for instance, the no texting and driving, and the safe cycling road, I forgot what it was.
Safe passage.
Yes.
For bicyclists, yeah.
Those are wonderful for the city. Big improvements.
Thank you.
Over your tenure, what are the three most significant improvements and or changes that you've made, in your opinion, for the police department?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll give three different answers, not specifically for the police department, but in terms of public safety. When we went through, we were in the recession. I came into office at the beginning of 2010. The first thing I had to do was cut hundreds of millions of dollars in spending. We are the only big city that I know of that didn't have to lay off a single police officer or single firefighter. And we did some pretty creative things to hold on to the law enforcement jobs. I mentioned the arrangement with the police pension board, where in order, obviously jailers are civilians, but if I laid off all the civilian jailers, I would have had to pull officers off the street. And so we wanted to make sure that we kept our officers more productively deployed. So the ability to navigate through all these layoffs and cutbacks and not materially impact the police department, and the good working relationship with the police pension. The fact that we were able to negotiate a successful 5-year contract with HBOU on pay, and police officers are getting pay raises.
Yes.
This year, next year, the year after, and in fact, again, I appreciate the fact that the officers were willing to understand that the city was in a bad way and that we needed some flexibility, but there's a hefty, over that time, a 10% pay raise
Yes.
for police officers. So that's direct benefit to the officers in the department. The third area is the things I've focused on outside of the department. You mentioned things like texting while driving. I'm very proud of the texting while driving campaign, which
Yes.
it's more of a public awareness campaign. I'm very proud of the work we're doing on human trafficking and the way we've been able to, we're trying to set a national model. I'm proud of the work we're doing on things like the Sobering Center, which really
Yes.
changed the dynamic of officers dealing with particularly the chronic homeless, where they don't have to take them to jail. They have a humane place to take the homeless. And then I'll just say that the women police officers have thanked me for the fact that one of the first things I did when I came in, if you like your BDU pants, that was my idea.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
So I have friends who are officers, and particularly with women with small waists, big belt, you can't get your hands in your pockets.
Yes.
And that was, and I said to the chief, he said, well, the chief said, the department has, I know it's a little thing, but he said that administrations in the past never wanted the paramilitary look. And I said, I want my officers to be comfortable. The other thing that I asked for was for the department to initiate the discussion of the exterior ballistic
Vest.
vests.
Yes.
And I mean, it's a department decision, it's not my decision, but I told the chief to start the ball rolling because, I've been on a couple of ride-alongs, and when I go on the ride-alongs, I have to wear the ballistic vest. It's hot as hell.
Yes.
You have to wear them. You absolutely have to wear them, but you ought to be able, chase somebody down, I get in the car, I put the air conditioning on full, I gotta be able to breathe. I'm more worried about officers stroking out and the heat impacts. Again, previous administrations had said that, had discouraged that because they didn't like when you wear the exterior vest, it's the paramilitary look, and it means that police officers don't seem as approachable or something. I just think, I want the officers to wear vests, but I want them to be, I think we ought to be thinking about officer comfort and safety at the same time. And so,
Yes, ma'am.
little thing that people may not know that I was involved in, but I'll just put that out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, first of all, thank you for coming out and meeting with us. I know you're busy. One of the items that I wanted to touch on is what the president talked about, and that's the Spanish pay. I do understand that some of the issues that were discussed are contract issues, and that's something that's handled through the NBA with the HPOU. But I wanted to make sure that you keep us in mind as far as the Spanish pay. I know that whenever HPOU goes back to the tables and to negotiate, that $60 that we currently get, I think that's been the pay for many years. And what I wanted to do is make sure that you keep us in mind, and for all our members, we do have a lot of Spanish speakers. I'm a Spanish speaker myself, and like the president said, there's many times where I have to stop what I'm doing just to help my partner out or help somebody else. And that takes time away from me. And I think that a little more incentive pay, would be appropriate. So, again, we do realize that it's a contract issue, and HPU is the one that, negotiates.
And it's not, frankly, it's not just Spanish language. We have Mandarin-speaking officers, we have Vietnamese-speaking officers. It's, as long as, you have to be using those language skills in the performance of your duties. Mm-hmm. Now, on the civilian side, we went through a process that council members no longer with us, but we changed our policies inside, and that we used to give language pay for anybody who could demonstrate language proficiency. We no longer do it with civilians unless you actually use it on the job. So if you're never called upon to use those language skills, you're not going to get any incentive pay. But so if you use it, not just Spanish, but language necessary for your job, and you use it on a regular and routine basis, you ought to get compensated. And it's a matter of negotiation what the level of compensation should be. But I absolutely believe you should be compensated for, if you bring extra skills in any area, you ought to be compensated for it.
Yeah, and like I said, we're going to approach the HOU about that, but we want to do it as a team. You say, hey, if you talk to the OSSO guys,
I'm happy. I'm happy to say that this is something that, from the city side, that we will advocate for in negotiations the next time we open the contract, because it is important to be able to police the city.
Correct.
That we have more people with language skills, critical language skills.
Okay, well, I'm going to conclude it with this question. This is a question I ask for all that I have for all candidates, and it's and I don't it's structured for everybody the same way. And this is the way I present it. Also, is appreciative that you would seek our support, and let us say that this year's political process is very competitive. I guess that's questionable. If you do not receive,
it's from my point of view, but I don't know.
If you do not receive our support and you win the election, will you reach back out to OSSO and seek to mend our differences?
I didn't receive your support last time.
And we appreciate you coming back.
Okay.
So we
I
know
think
you've lived the experience, correct?
Right. I would be surprised not to receive the endorsement, and hurt, frankly, not to receive the endorsement. But I've been in politics a long time, and in governing the city of Houston, I have to work with everybody who lives in the city of Houston. I have to work with everybody who works for the city of Houston, and so the door stays open, and we move on.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Sure.
We'll shut it down.